I'm trying to convince somebody of some point of view. I'm trying to get them to understand something in the blink of an eye. And so I'll go back and reframe it for myself.
Today's guest is someone who has mastered the art of saying more with less. Craig Frazier is an illustrator whose work has appeared everywhere, from the New York Times to U.S. postage stamps, from Fortune 500 boardrooms to children's books. His style is bold and minimal and instantly recognizable. But what makes it remarkable is how it invites you in. Craig distills complex ideas into simple, striking images. He leaves room for interpretation, for curiosity, for the viewer to connect their own meaning. It's an approach that isn't just about illustration. It's about how we choose to communicate, lead, and live. Welcome to Design Of. I'm your host, Justin Ahrens. And in this conversation, we'll talk about the decisions that shaped his career, how he balances clarity with depth, and why sometimes the most powerful part of the story is the part you don't tell. Let's get started. Hey, how rude is it that a guy asks someone else to give him his personal time and he's late to his own interview? What kind of host am I, Craig? Seriously.
How's that?
Perfect.
You can hear me now.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How you doing? Look at that org chart you got behind you. What are you organizing?
So actually creating content, and then a couple talks, and then some of the stuff I want to do around paper spec. I just had to get it out of my brain.
Got it.
You like that? I see things in pictures, so I have to draw them so I can.
Oh no, I don't have a whiteboard, but I pages and in my sketchbooks and stuff. I have to do it and then I forget to go back to it, but at least I did it. It's just, I always say it's like moving stuff from your dining room table into the garage.
To get rolling here, Craig, what I don't know is where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a couple different places. My dad was in the Air Force, so I moved around a lot. I lived in Lubbock, Texas. Believe that? Yeah. I lived in Alamogordo, New Mexico, because I was usually on air bases.
Yeah.
So I was in like elementary, middle school in Alamogordo. Then I moved to Livermore, California, which is here in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And then I moved to Albuquerque, back to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then my parents got divorced. I moved back to Livermore, graduated high school in Livermore. And then I've been here in the Bay Area since then.
I love it. Oh. You left what I see and many believe is a successful design career to focus on illustration full time. So can you walk me through that? Like, what was the moment or realization that made you commit to that shift?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. It took a long time, over a number of years, to arrive at that place. You're right. Things were like going pretty well. And I think I had 5 or 6 people in the studio working. We had a great studio, which is now the Adobe building in San Francisco. And so that was like 96. So my daughter would have been 11. My son would have been like 8. You know, we were busy. We were busy a lot. There was still a little bit of print being done, all the transition no, there was still a lot of print, but we had put typesetters out of business. Printers were becoming less and less. And I think actually annual reports were on their way out. And we did a fair number of annual reports. But I did a lot of work in technology. So I was in the car driving from San Francisco down to the Silicon Valley a lot. I never figured out how to have a salesperson. I always wanted one, and I never could figure out how to do it. So I was doing that. I was running the studio, and I was really the primary designer. I never learned how to trust designers either. So even though I had employees, so I was like a terrible business manager.
I was about to say, we might have to dig into that psychosis a little bit.
I'd hire a senior designer, but then I wouldn't really, it's not I wouldn't trust him. I just wouldn't, that was a decent idea, but how about one? And can we execute this? And so I was learning to be a pretty fast designer, so I would design in between. I designed between meetings and between writing proposals and all that shit. As any good designer learns to do, you'd like fit it in. And so I just felt really pinched, even though we were busy and we were making money. I just, really, this is it? what it feels like. And I just felt so much stress from it. And my kids were little, and my wife was a stay-at-home mom raising these kids, and I'm doing 10 hours a day in the studio. And I just thought, this doesn't seem right. Now, that's also combined with the fact that I was hiring a lot of photographers and illustrators to do projects like annual reports. Take the photographers in. If you're doing an annual report, then your budget might be half going out to that vendor, that photographer, that illustrator. And I thought, this just seems unjust. I get the job, I got to sell it, I got to advance the money, and I got to pay. And these guys don't even have to show up for a meeting. They got to do their job, and they're going. And then in the book, they get the full page. They're the stars, even though I had to engineer this whole thing. And so I'd always wanted to be an illustrator. I always had a graphic look to the way I was working because I like to draw. So I started to put this together, and I said, geez, I wonder if I could be an illustrator. I could be that guy to get that big page, and I could leave all that design management shit behind. I could just let, the designers around the country do that and let me work for them. And you think that would be an easy idea to arrive at, but it took me a number of years to think maybe I could do this. Of course, the big if was like, could I be an illustrator?
My follow-up question, what made you think you could be an illustrator?
What made me think that, of course. I'd illustrated a lot for my own projects, just spot illustrations and stuff, but I didn't have a style or anything. I could just draw. And I had 2 projects. I thought, well, I'm gonna hire myself to illustrate this, like Push Pen would do, right?
Yeah.
I had it was this called the Energy Foundation. It was an annual report, and they didn't have much money. And I said, I really have a good excuse to do this because I don't have the budget. So I'm just going to do these drawings myself. And I could do thumbnails of what I thought a concept was. I thought, well, all I just do is execute my thumbnails. I never used to have to execute them. I'll just execute these. I did that annual. Client loved it. And I had a ball. This is freaking great. And then I had a project for Larry Olson's for Oracle Computers. Did the same thing. Had a blast. And then the last one, I did the annual report for Symantec, which is still around. It was their 2nd year annual report. And I did the same thing. I hired the writer, and I hired me as the illustrator, and I illustrated it. And I thought, this is just way too much fun. And I thought, if I could extract that design part out of it, and not that I hated designing, but it's just, if I wanted to really be good at illustration, I had to do illustration all the time. I needed to. And so I teed it up, and at that same time, I went and got up. So I hadn't closed the design firm, but I was illustrating. I got a cover for Time magazine, which was insane. I can't get one today. I got that before I was really, and this was
established.
This is definitely before I was established, but this is pre-internet. So we're sending around 9 portfolios around remember they FedEx them around, and they're floating, and you're making prints and shit. And so I had an idea, which was, why am I sending 9 portfolios around? So any moment in time, I could only be in front of 9 people. That's the best case scenario if they were all out. I said, I'm a designer. I could figure this out. Why don't I make a little brochure of my work and invest in myself and mail this to every publication in the country and every design firm that I know? So it has to be sitting on somebody's desk. So it is a portfolio. I didn't wait for a portfolio review. I planting seeds to say, hey, when something comes along, maybe you might want to use me. I got work instantly when I did that. So I probably invested $5,000 or something, and I printed the booklet and I sent it out.
You remember how many people you sent it to?
I bet I sent it to 800 or 900, maybe, something like that. But I sent it to Atlantic Monthly, I sent it to Rolling Stone, I sent it to Time, every Fortune magazine, all of those. Because you could get the names for one thing in the day. You could knew who other art directors were. And then we all had CAs, so I knew everybody around who was good.
Right.
So of course you went to where you wanted to work for the best people. I tried that and I just got work. And so as soon as that work started coming in, I remember telling my wife, I said, I'm going to make less money. You need to be prepared for this because there's no way this is going to work like a design firm. But I'm going to be a lot happier and I'm going to be more present at home. And she backed me 100%, said, go for it. We'll definitely take the better mood if that's going to happen. And I did get in a better mood because the work was really fun. And I actually made more money than I did as a designer. So
Great. Let's go back for a second. How did you get the Time magazine? Was it from the self-promo piece?
I think it must have been. I think it happened right away. I do think it was that promo piece because they wouldn't have known me. And my rep didn't get that. I got it.
Yeah. It's awesome. So if you can think about that sort of first official day or after a few days of just you being an illustrator, did you literally feel like a mood shift, a perspective shift?
Totally. I put away my suits and ties. I didn't have to take meetings. That part was cut out, if you imagine, and it didn't commute. So I live in Mill Valley, which is on the other side of the bridge from San Francisco. So I used to commute 40 minutes into the city. I cut that out and got an office straight downtown Mill Valley, 10 minutes away from where I live, right over Pete's Coffee. So I drive down, park in front, and it was I always had this fantasy. If I want to work in a little downtown and look down into the street and draw, like you fantasize illustrators do. Maybe they do it in Connecticut. Maybe they work that way. And that's exactly what happened. Wow. I just would go down there and then at lunch, I'd go over to the little restaurant and order a pizza and I'd take my sketchbook and I'd work on problems. And now I was not unencumbered with employees. I took the woman that ran my office at my design firm. I said, do you want to stay with me? Everybody else got let go. Everybody went to other design firms. And she said, absolutely, I'll stick with you. So she came with me as my office manager. So I always had somebody doing my insurance and doing my bookkeeping and doing my FedEx things and answering the phone and doing estimates for me. Illustrators get a bad rap. Actually, they earn the reputation of not really being business people. They work alone. They always work at home. I work at home now for the first time in my entire career. My office is at home, but I've never worked at home. I always wanted to go to a place to work.
Yeah.
So it's a job. And particularly when I was when I started the illustrations, no, I'm going to go and have a cool place that's going to have my library and it's where I go to work. So I wouldn't work at home at night. I would leave. And so I always treated, and Joni worked with me for 20 years and was paid. We had profit sharing and she ran my business.
That's great.
And so as an illustrator, for instance, I would never talk to a prospect until she'd cleared him. She'd vetted him and she'd said, like, why do you want him to work for you? What's your budget? How'd you hear from everything? She'd grind these people down because I got rid of a rep after 2 years. I didn't have a rep anymore. And so we just did it ourselves. And so she was amazing at shaking clients down before I would get the project or before it would get to me in the shop. And so I think that was probably a great deal as to why it worked. Let's put it that way.
I really want to dig into what I feel is like your signature style. I think I shared this with you before, like the things that are attracting me to your work and like Michael Schwab's work is just, it feels like a design perspective done so beautifully from an illustration standpoint. And it's for you particularly, I love like clarity. I love metaphor. I love how things are in your work that's unsaid, but that you're saying something. And it's interesting to have a podcast where it's not visual and your work is so visual. But I know when I put some samples in the show notes, people recognize your work. I guess, first of all, how did you come to that sort of signature style or that perspective of, I don't know, is reduction the right word you use? How would you explain it?
I think that's good. I think what is it? You take away things to there's no more confusion left. You just keep extracting stuff out of it until it's down, it's bare bones. I think your observation is totally right, as I'm like a designer that became an illustrator. So one, I'd studied a lot of other illustrators and the people that, certainly Michael Schwab, who's a friend. And I paid attention to everybody from certainly Milton Glaser and Quast and that whole gang. But even like the Richards group, if you remember back in the day, those guys were Sibley Petit. Those guys were doing great illustration and fun and playful and smart. And so I think that my training doing trademarks actually affected that idea of the style as an illustrator, where I tried to be really singular. I've drawn landscapes, but I don't think that way. I was like, can I get this down to one single thing? And what's interesting, my work always has this character in it. And that was a total accident, because two things. I hated drawing people. I didn't want to draw faces. I don't want to draw hands. And if you look at the really early work, there's no fingers on the hands. The faces are really indiscernible. The scale is really off. The head is really teeny. But they were like a little bit glorified stick figures. And I do explain it in the book. I talk about this everyman. If I could make this character just be as anonymous as possible, because I didn't want you to get to know him personally. That was never important to me. It's what's the act that he's in, what has just happened or what's about to happen. So it's a little bit of a story being told there. And I finally arrived, I said, I can just always put, I'm going to say 95% of the time, I put a character in that he's engaged in something is taking place. He's doing something is being done to him, or he's about to step into something that he is not prepared for. And that I drew that character a few times when I was starting. He was really primitive. It was like, how few lines could you use to draw a person and give it any kind of ability to have motion and perspective? And that's where he arrived. I just kept drawing him. And in many ways, I like some of the earlier drawings better because I got better at drawing him. And he got the weirdness of the early ones are cool now that I look back at them.
Yeah, I think when I discovered your work, the way you describe the logo work, it's like I remember, I think I was going through O'Hare and I was already familiar with your work, and there was like this gigantic illustration and it was obviously you.
Yeah.
And what I thought about the illustration that was so rewarding to the client was that you said so much visually, because you had, I think, that gift of a designer solving a problem and differently than maybe classic illustrators. That might be unfair. But I was like, wow, he's telling the whole story of this. I don't know if it was a tech company or investment or something. Just in
a financial company. Yeah. Pfizer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that is there. I don't think there was even any words, maybe the logo on it. And it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
They put some little headline or something. They would write the stuff after the fact, actually. That was a company called Navigant, and they were a public company in Chicago. And they bought that, what is it, the C Wing or whatever in O'Hare. They bought all of those. There was one that went over the escalator.
Yeah,
big, wide, expansive thing. And then when you went down, it was in terminals. Then when you went out the jetway, they had boards all the way down, these big backlit things. That client, this is a quick aside, but I may be one of the luckiest illustrators in the world, because that client hired me for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And I would do over 50 illustrations a year for them. So it was their entire brand, and it grew into that over time. I did some design firm hired me, and I did their first annual. I illustrated, and then they hired me to do a couple more things. And then after that, I just negotiated directly with the company. It was never,
Cool.
there was never a design firm involved even.
You said something in your book that I love, and because I would love to know a little bit about whatever you're comfortable sharing about your process. But one of the quotes in your book is, I look for clues in the story. If it's about computers, I usually start drawing plants.
Yeah.
So I love that. Tell me what you are highlighting there.
Particularly where I am, most of the work, certainly when I started as an illustrator, was computer. It was all tech. And there were terms like networking, and there were words that described what technology was doing. And so when they get networking, they draw these networks, they draw these diagrams like an engineer would do. And I think in the book I had done one about networks. And so I used these leaves and foliage, and it's like a natural network. It is a network, but it's not that cold. And so that happened really early on. It was like, never draw a picture of what the words are, because that doesn't advance it anywhere. The words have a responsibility to inform you at some level of vocabulary that we all share. And then if I can add to that by twisting that and skewing it just a little bit, it makes those words a little bit stronger, and vice versa. They always say, never do a monkey see, monkey do. You never draw a picture of the words. And this is a lesson like in kids' books. The kid doesn't learn anything if you say exactly what the picture is. And so as soon as I started thinking about metaphor, I started thinking, wow, that's the way into this. That's the secret that I can bring, because that just became a real strength of mine, to be able to never draw what was obvious. And it creates this opening for the audience to be able to go in and say, let me figure out what this thing is really about. And there's a delicate balance of making it too obtuse. If it's too hard to get in, then it doesn't work. If it's too easy to get in, then it gets over too quickly. So it's this little balance. I think I say, I'll take it to the edge of where I've just about explained it, and then I back up one step. So it's just on the cusp of being obvious.
Yeah, because some of my favorite illustrations you've done are the things where you think it's obvious, and then when you look into it, there's a picture within a picture. It's those hidden little gems. I love that. And then again, that feels very graphic design centric to me, at least how I look at that. But so many of your projects carry a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
How does meaning find its way into your work?
You mean in terms of actual, the usefulness of it, or that, do you mean?
But also just what you're trying to, like the Boy Scouts love stamp, that also feels to be like purpose driven, right? Like you have a message, a cultural message or a social message. Like, how does that work into your process?
They're a little bit imbued in them because it's a stamp and it's going to go out there. That one is a given, and that's the honor about it. That's the thrill of it. It's why everybody wants to do one. And by the way, I pitch them all the time. I have one stamp that I finished 3 years ago, a holiday stamp. They bought it and we finished it, and they still haven't produced it. It's a beautiful little holiday stamp. But and I did one last year. They asked me to do it and they rejected it. The scouting one, I wasn't a scout. My dad was a scout. I did the Boy Scout first. That was cool. And then they came back and said, the Girl Scouts want one. And the cute thing about that is the profile on that Girl Scout is my daughter. It's not.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. She wasn't a Girl Scout, but that's her.
Yeah.
So that part is a little fun. Yeah. That's Danielle. The bird, the love stamp, what's interesting there is they'd hired me the first time to do a stamp called Nurturing Love. And it was a pre-printed envelope. And it's probably there in the book, but it's just this, I had the gardener leaning over, she's watering this plant that makes this big heart. It's just real graphic. It's like a little trademark. It's one color. And in the course of doing that, I submitted a whole bunch of other drawings. And one of those was those two interlocking birds. And 2 years later, they came back and said, hey, this would make a cool love stamp. And everybody wants to do the love stamp. And I said, hell yes, yeah, we'll do that. So That one, I think there's a sense of messaging there because of the scale of doing a stamp. The idea that maybe, can you imagine if everybody was using one of those that year? My son, when he was little, he said, "Dad, do you get 37 cents every time they sell these?" I said, "I wish."
Yeah. Cool.
But back to your other point about meaning, I have to say, we all do this as designers. We work for meaningless companies and or less meaning companies and less meaning products. Some at times we have to just to work. We work for things. I still have never and never would do a cigarette. I do alcohol. I will. There's things I've turned down just I think are ethically I don't want to be involved in. But if you're doing like financial companies, which I did a lot of because it's always abstract messaging, I seem to fit with that one really well. I would think about the ethics of it, but secretly, I'm trying to make that a better, I'm not trying to make them look better by bringing my good humor, my wit, whatever, to these companies, to make it a little bit easier to swallow. I've told this joke when I've spoken, is that because I worked for the Wall Street Journal for probably 10 years doing big full-page illustrations, and I said, man, do they owe me? Because those were the driest, toughest articles I've ever had to illustrate. They're just impossible. They're not even something, I guess if you're really interested in finance, you want to read those, but they were so hard to illustrate. I mean, I think the one of them that's in the book is the article about, this is when e-commerce was just starting, and the article was about e-commerce failing. And I was like, who cares? This is deadly stuff to read. But that's where I said, but there's no way I'm going to try to draw what that's like, because what is e-commerce anyway? And so I drew this shopping cart with flat tires. So to my idea of that is that I'm making this more interesting, far more interesting than it is.
Yeah.
And part of that is my own disdain for some of these articles. It's just so bad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have some fun with this.
Yeah. And again, what I was sharing earlier with the opportunity the clients have when they hire you is that you do just that. And I don't know if they realize that as much as people who view it feel it subconsciously, or increase readership because, wow, that's interesting that cart has flat tires, right? Like you're making something at least attractive enough for me to start the article, right? And I
Exactly.
get and even if I don't read the whole thing in today's world, at least I get the concept because I'm a skimmer. So I would get the concept from there. But can you share a time when a project's impact surprised you beyond the client's brief, or something happened and you were just like, wow, I didn't expect that was gonna have that kind of response?
That's an interesting question, because clients are notorious for never getting back to you on that stuff, never giving you feedback. At least you never really know. I think I would have to say, because it's an indirect response, the fact that I got retained by that company in Chicago for about 10 years, that was surprising to me, because really, and they obviously got positive feedback from their clients, or they wouldn't have kept me around. Marketing directors are notorious for changing things up right away, and you can be fired the next day without ever even knowing why.
Yeah.
So I guess in a case like that, where I was able to retain business for a long time, I felt that that was an indirect compliment that I was doing a pretty good job, and whatever I was trying to do was working. In a case like that, I was being some component of the branding, and because as a designer, I understand that well enough, I never set out to do that. Anybody that uses you twice in a row might claim you to be part of their brand, whether or not that was intentional.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what other one, though, because I think that's a really great question. Certainly the kids' books that I've done, just to get letters from parents and stuff is just amazing. That's just the best. To have a teacher send you a photograph and say, we used your Lots of Dots books today in class. It's just like the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Going back to the theme we're on with the financial example. Do you have a process to break something open when you're stuck?
It's funny that I think so many of us want to know how we solve the riddle when we just do. And I've never really quite known what my method was, other than there's no excuses. I never feel like I don't ever really get writers or illustrators block. Right. I might get slowed down or something, but we don't grant ourselves permission to get that. You show up and you do your work, and certainly a client doesn't want to hear, geez, the muse wasn't around today. So I think that if I get stuck, two things I would do. One is to walk away from it and go do something else and come back. And if you're really lucky as an illustrator, you're really busy. So you just go and work on another project. You've got several of them going at a time, so you ping pong around. The other thing is that if it's a manuscript, for instance, if it's editorial, I just print out the story that they send me, and I just draw on the margins as I read it. I underline and stuff. I go, here's a jewel here. There's something here that I could get to, and I'll scribble down a sketch, and then I go on, now keep reading it. But the designer in me says, go back to the brief, Craig. Find out, what are we trying to do? What is the objective here? And if it's a design problem, sometimes a logo has a bigger objective, but they're really not much different than just an illustration objective, which is I'm trying to convince somebody of some point of view. I'm trying to get them to understand something in the blink of an eye. And so I'll go back and reframe it for myself. I'll go, Craig, you're not thinking about this right. What does it mean? What does it look like if an executive doesn't care about compensation or employee compensation? What does that look like? I don't know. That's not in my vocabulary. Okay, so break that down. Well, if you're not paying attention to something, what does that look like? It could be blinders. That's a nice metaphor, right, for having narrow tunnel vision. And if it's blinder to compensation, what if those were dollar bills? What if that was, can you mix up those little metaphors, those little idioms together and come up with something? And so if I can say that to you, then I can visualize that. If I can tell you that, I can say that what if, then all I have to do is try to draw it and see if it has promise. So very often I find if I am stuck, it's because I'm still not clear on what I'm trying to say. And it's funny, I was working this morning in the gym. I was working on this talk for our paper specs thing, and I was trying to think about what I want to talk about. And it's like, one of the gifts that any designer can have with experience is this: when you quit thinking about your execution and you start thinking about how it performs, what you're going to make happen, you can do better work. Because you're not thinking like a designer. I've got to make sure that this is all this cute little package. And you start thinking about, how does this work in the real world? How does this thing stand up, and what does somebody think when they see it? And when you start thinking that way, it's like reverse engineering, and it informs the way I draw something. Execution is execution. That's a different modality. If you're really gifted, you can draw like Bill Mayer, for instance. His sketches are better than my finished work. And I can't. I have to work stuff through. But so I start with a rough sketch. And if I can see if there's a inkling of hope in that thing, then I'll keep at it. I know that I can refine it. I can draw it eventually well enough so it looks good. But so often, we as designers rush in and try to finish something before we've really decided if it was any worth a damn.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. Let me ask you, we're talking about process, and we don't have to get too into the weeds here. I think illustrator, designer or not, I'm sure you've had times where things weren't landing with a client. If someone hires you to do an editorial illustration, do you show them one idea or do you have to show them a bunch of ideas typically? Or does it vary?
No, I keep to a plan of showing a few ideas. I want to go back for a second and think the days when I was a designer in San Francisco, when there was John Casado and Michael Vanderbyle and Mannering and the hot shots were all around there. The word on the street, and it may not be true, was that they were all these one solution shows. It was a Paul Rand kind of thing. Take it or leave it. This is
my genius.
You hired me. This is my genius. There it is. I don't know how many of them ever did that, but I did it a few times and I tried it a few times. And I think when I did LucasArts, I think I did that. I did do a one solution thing. It's really tough because if you get thrown out on that, it's your credibility, everything is at risk, right?
Yeah.
It's dicey. And somewhere before I became an illustrator, I started to think, you know what, there's not just one solution to everything. Everything's got a whole bunch of possibilities. Now, I may only be able to do a few because I only have so many tools in my bag, but if you hire 3 different designers, you're going to get 3 different solutions. That's if they just give you one. If they each give you 3, you got 9 solutions. And the rightness of a solution has to do with its measurement against an objective. It's not personal. That's where we get in trouble, right? It's personal to us and it's personal to a client. That's when you get personal judgment and taste and all that shit gets in the way. But so I started right back then, before I became an illustrator, I said, I'm going to do 3 solutions to every one of them. And I'm going to show a client 3. And maybe more, but I'm not going to show them 10, but I'll show them 3. And there's 2 things that happen. One is it's liberating to me if I'm doing, and I do the same thing with my illustrations. I'm get one, I'm like, okay, I got 1 down, 1 in the bag. That's good. I'm going to do another one. 2 are really looking good. Got another one, good. And then by the 3rd one, I'm like really feeling really liberated. It's like, I know that these 2 are solid. Now I'm going to try something maybe I wouldn't try. I'm going to see if I can move this out to another place. And that becomes really crazy good. Like I tell us, the students get stuck on, I'm going to keep working on this one till I'm done. As soon as I get anything even feels like it's close, I move on. I'll go back to that and finish that later, but I'm not going to sit and doodle that thing out. And I do the very same practices with an illustration. So that's my side of it that's liberating. What I understand from a client's point of view is you come in with 3 that are all good. Every client wants a choice. It's like going to the restaurant. You want to have some measure of choice in it. And so if you can move the dial so there's one in the middle, I don't mean that it's like consumer friendly, it's just like that's solid. One that's maybe a little more obtuse, I don't know, maybe it goes into a little farther out place, and another one that's maybe in another little different direction. You start to find out maybe the client is more willing than you thought to take a risk. And I found this with illustration, by the way. The other rule I have with them is I'm going to send you 3 very tight black and white sketches, but you don't get to mess with them. You don't get to mingle them. You don't get to say, how about that one with this one? They're separate ideas and you have to take them as is. I don't go back and now start to work on them again. And the reason I say that is not out of arrogance. It's that if you open that door up, I'll be drawing forever, because they want to start to meddle. So I just started to make a rule. It's like, I just don't do that way.
Yeah.
I remember when I used to work with Don Weller, when I was the design firm, I hired Don a number of times. And Don always said to me, he said, when I finish the drawing, if you don't like it, I'll do it again. And I always thought, when somebody says that to you, you're really likely to like it, for one thing, because you already know he's not protecting anything. And so I always tell the client, I'm going to give you these 3 tissues and you have to pick one. But if, by the way, I have completely missed the boat on everything and you can convince me of that, I'll do them all over again. No harm, no foul. Now, I maybe only have ever had to do that once, But as soon as the client knows that it's like, by the way, I have 10 sketches. I'm just not going to show you all.
Right. Well, you said a couple of things that I just want to go back to and emphasize, because I think it might have been one of my first big clients. I went in with one idea because I thought it was so perfect. And it really wasn't, I don't believe it was arrogance, or it wasn't like a polisher type thing. I just thought it was like the right decision. And I remember walking in and he goes, if the choice is one, then my choice is none. Like I need to see options. And although he ended up picking that initial direction that I showed him, which at first kind of annoyed me, but what it did, these other directions actually proved to him that was the best solution. Yes. And so that's where I shifted on that. And then one of the things I just laugh, and again, some of my interns in the past have called me to old school. I tell people all the time, especially when it comes to logo work, if you're just doing 3 sketches and picking the third sketch and you're just going to work on that thing until it's done, you're missing out 47 other ideas you haven't sketched out yet. You still might come back. That third idea still might be the best one, but you don't know yet.
No.
And so those are the things. I don't get to do that work as much anymore, but those are the moments I love, just opening up the sketchbook before I even touch the computer and saying, hey, do I have this? Is this here? One of the things I really enjoy in your book is you have some of your rough sketches in there.
Yeah. And
so I feel like I can see some of your process, and I think that's really magical.
Just an add on to that little point, you're absolutely right, is that if you haven't explored it, and part of it, the client appreciates going, wow, thank you for taking me down that road a little bit. And now I understand why you were pushing so hard on that one that you liked. You just involved me just enough in your process. And to me, it's not a sucking up. It's not a game. It's just really, it's like a courtesy. Let's go into this thing knowing full well there's a bunch of possibilities. And that changes that dynamic. You just said it. Your first client just said one is not a choice. You just closed the door. You said, look, I'm not going to show you anything. And I think that took me a long time to learn that. That's a little bit of a courtesy thing, and it goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Has there been like one visual riddle or like metaphor you've drawn that still speaks to you today?
Oh, God, that's a great question. Doing the book, I had to look through thousands, maybe 1,000 illustrations to decide what was going to be in there. And so I had to look at those a lot and try to ask that question, what stood up over time. There was one that's in the book, it's in the front end, and it was a thing that I did back when I was just getting started. And it was a black and white, it's just a fountain, and it has these colored water drops coming out of it. But the fountain is the classic 2 profiles, 2 faces looking at each other, because that was the silhouette. And I look at it and it's so minimal, and it's just cut out of my amberlith, the way I cut stuff. So it's so innocent. It's so innocent and so unfussed with. And so there are a number from that period that were just so, when you get good at cutting amberlith small, over time you can do anything.
Yeah.
And I love some of the innocence of some of my earlier work. What I mean by innocence, that maybe it's more naivete, but it's not trying too hard. Mm. And so I don't know if I answered your question. I don't think I did, but the one of them, I'm looking at it here, it's the last sketch in the book, the very last sketch. And it's this little bird that's holding up a tree. He's right. There's cross section there, and it's this little dove in there. And I like it for 2 reasons. One, it's funny. It was a sketch that I did in a sketchbook, not for a client. And it's just ironic. It's the bird that lives in a tree that is holding up this massive tree in this cross section. It's a completely unbelievable possibility, which is something that I believe in. And Chris Harold, do you know Chris?
I know Chris very well. Yeah.
Chris, did I know Chris by then? Yes, I had. I'd done that.
So you must have done that. You must have done this for Mohawk then.
Yes, he called me and he said, "We just bought Crane's Crane paper, and we want to do an engraved Christmas card this year." And I saw that sketch in your sketchbook. I had put it up on Instagram, and he said, "Could you finish that?" And I said, "Done." And it's not cut with ammo. It's a pen and ink drawing. It's just a drawing about this big. But when they engraved it, it looked gorgeous for one thing. And then I've since made it into a silkscreen poster. I'll get one of these to you. I think it's more like later, there's something that feels so good about it to me. I mean, it was never an answer to it. It was never a solution to a problem. You know what I mean? It was sort of like it was one of these was a solution looking for a problem.
So when you do your illustrations, and let me see if I can ask this question correctly. Do you, and now all of your work isn't necessarily for commercial. I know you do postal work and other work and that sort of thing, but when you're doing, let me rephrase this question. When you're doing your commercial work or your non-commercial work, do you ever imagine or think about or have an expectation of how the viewer receives it or experiences what you've made?
I think about it in terms of, is my symbology universal enough? Is this going to communicate? Is there an opportunity, or have I left the door wide open enough and not too wide open? So I'm thinking about, I'm absolutely thinking about its ability always. Is this gonna work? I don't go so far as to go, wow, how are they going to feel when they open this, and will they cherish it or whatever? I don't get that far with it, but I always think about, does it work? Now, but I don't ask anybody about that. You know what I mean? I don't ask the client if they think it's going to work, because most of the time most clients will say, yeah, they get it. But if given a chance, a client would rather you tell the joke, explain the joke.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And there goes the purpose of the whole thing out the window. That ain't going to be memorable.
I'll give you, in closing, I have two question options. One, if you could go back in time, would there be something that you would love to give yourself advice on? Or what are some projects or something that you have yet to do that you would love to do? It's like on your bucket list to do.
I think I like the first one the best, and I don't know what advice I would give. I think I would have saved some of the money that I spent. I would have done that on rent and offices and stuff like that. Right. I think I would have done that. I think back and I think of there were some design clients that I resigned that I shouldn't have. I should have figured out how to keep that longer. There were times where I think ego got a little bit in the way. I don't know if I would do anything. I could say I would have liked to have started an illustration career earlier, but I wouldn't have been the illustrator that I would had I not had 18 years of graphic design. And so I think every illustrator should be a designer first. And I think every writer should be a designer first, and vice versa. And every designer should learn to write, all those kinds of things. Yeah. And I feel lucky. It's funny, I was just emailing with my first boss today, who's still a friend of mine, who hired me out of college in 1978. And he's a neighbor of mine at Sea Ranch, and we're still friends. And we were talking about we were bemoaning the course of graphic design and what's come over the years. And I have to say, I just feel so lucky to have entered at that time when print was really important, typesetting was important, and we had to work. We could only work at such a pace because we didn't have technology speeding us along. You could only make a mechanical so fast. And so that taught some measure of patience, but it also taught some measure of, okay, this is going to be hard to do. So I got to make sure that I'm working on something that work on for that long and make sure it's good. The idea is good in the core. Now, today, you don't have to do that. You can have it put together in a matter of hours on your computer, and it can still be a piece of shit because it wasn't worked out. And so I just feel so grateful to have come from that era, because it's completely gave me the entire foundation for the way that I work.
One of my first job interviews after I'd started my career was I went to an agency and had a great interview, and they're like, now could you paste up that board? And I did not get the job because I wasn't fast enough.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I think I'm okay that I'm not, because I was right on the cusp. So I got hired at my first place because I was the first person that they had met that had worked on the computer. Now, unbeknownst to them, I'd only, I think, worked on it twice. So it wasn't like I was totally experienced, but I'm like, oh yeah, of course I have computer experience, because I just wanted a job so bad in the industry.
Were you still buying out type at the time, or were you said this? You were still.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. I was buying out type, and then I was helping them convert to doing types in the type on the computer and then sending it out and then pasting it up.
You're right. We had to send it out to a service bureau to produce the repros.
Yeah.
And that type was bad, wasn't it?
Oh, it was bad. I thought it was great, but in hindsight, it was cool. Terrible. It was terrible, but yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. Yeah. Yeah.
Craig, man, it is lovely to get to talk to you. I can't wait to see you here in about a month. And again, thanks for the inspiration for me personally. I use you and a couple other of my favorites as examples to my team. And the impact you've had on our community is just really brilliant. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the invitation and for making me feel welcome on your program, because the conversation is where I would want it to be, and you appreciate the things that I enjoy talking about. So an honor, pleasure to me.
Thank you.
My conversation with Craig left me thinking about the role of space, not just on the page, but in life. The courage to leave things unsaid, the discipline to reduce something to its essence, and the trust to let other people step in and make it their own. Craig's work is a reminder that clarity and meaning often come from subtraction, not addition. That curiosity and play aren't just creative tools, they're ways of seeing the world. Craig, thank you for sharing your story and your insights with us. And to you listening, I hope you carry this reminder into whatever you're making next. Leave a little room for wonder. Before we go, I want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing the soundtrack to our show. Ryan's music brings so much depth and beauty to these conversations. I'm so grateful. If you want more, visit sleepingatlast.com or search Sleeping at Last wherever you listen to music. And of course, our show wouldn't be a show without a special shout out to our brilliant audio engineer, Steve Wick, who loved this episode so much, he got out his favorite finger paints.
It seems I might have stumbled upon an acting opportunity.
As a member of the Blue Man Group?
Oh no, you're thinking of the support group. I made that same mistake myself. They're called the Blue Man Group.
You haven't auditioned yet?
Oh no, I'm not in the group yet. No, I'm afraid I just blew myself.
There's got to be a better way to say that.
If this episode sparked something for you, please take a moment to leave us a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen. Share it with a friend, post about it. It helps us keep these stories going. Follow us on X at Design of Podcast, and visit rule29.com to learn more about the show and the people behind it. Thanks for being here, and as always, keep noticing, stay curious, and design a life that matters.